In this video, we're going to work in the other direction. So instead of graphing, you're going to be given the graph, and your end game here is to try to write the equation from the graph in slope-intercept form. And we have some lines and we have some inequalities here, and so we want to put all of these in slope-intercept form when possible. So let's start with the graph over here on the top left-hand side. So we want to write the line in y equals mx plus b form. So we'll start off by, let's find b. Well, b is the y-intercept. So b in this problem is going to be -1. So it crosses the y-axis, -1. Now we want to find our slope. So now that we know where the y-intercept is, you want to find another lattice point. Now, a lattice point is nothing more than somewhere where the graph crosses perfectly in the corner of one of those grid boxes. And so I'm going to find the one that's closest to the y-intercept, and the next place I see is right over here at 1, -3. So I'll put a dot there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to find our slope, and you always start from the point on the left side and figure out how to get to the point on the right side. So I go down 2, right 1. So my slope, being rise over run, or change in y over change in x, is going to be -2 over 1, which is the same thing as -2. So the equation of this line would be y equals -2x minus 1. Okay, next example here. Same thing, I want to write the equation of the line y equals mx plus b. And we have the graph, so let's start by figuring out what b is. B is the y-intercept. Well, this graph crosses the y-axis at -1, so b is -1. Now we want to find the slope. So I need to get a second point that is on that line, and I'm looking for a place where it crosses perfectly in the corner of the box, and I see somewhere right here at 3. So I'm going to figure out how to get there. I go up 1, which means that my slope has the top number of 1, and I go to the right 3. So right, it means +3 also. Remember, slope is always change in y over change in x. Let's not get that upside down. So our equation here would be y equals 1/3 times x minus 1. Another line here. So let's look at this line. Now, this is a vertical line. Vertical lines cannot be written in slope-intercept form, and the reason is because slope-intercept form requires y equals mx plus b, and this line just goes straight up and down. And vertical lines are always written as x equals a number. Well, the number that we set it equal to is where it crosses the x-axis. It crosses the x-axis at -4, so this equation is going to be x equals -4. So let's look at another one of our special case lines here, and that's the horizontal line. Horizontal lines are written in terms of their y values because they have a constant y value, and their equations are always written as y equals a number. Well, the number that the y value has the entire time on the line is y equals 1, so this equation would be y equals 1. Now let's progress one step farther, add one more step to it. So now we're going to look at the inequalities. So not only do we have to write the equation line, we have to get the inequality sign correct based on if the line is dashed or solid, or if I shade above or if I shade below. So let's start by writing the equation y equals mx plus b, or at least trying to figure out the m and the b part. So b still is the y-intercept. So b in this problem is 4, it crosses the y-axis at +4. We want to find the slope here, so m. So go find somewhere else where it crosses perfectly in the corner of one of those grid boxes, and I see it at -2. And so to find our slope, we start with the point identified on the left, figure out how to get back to the point on the right, and we need y, change in y on top and the change in the x on the bottom. So we go up 3. So I put 3 on top of my fraction, right 2, and I put 2 on the bottom. So our equation here is going to be y something, and then I have 3 over 2x plus 4. I still have to figure out what this inequality sign is. Well, since this problem has a dashed line, that means it's either going to be less than or greater than. It's not going to be equal to because it's dashed. And since all of the shading is beneath the line, under it, that means y has to be less than whatever that line is. So we choose the less than sign for y. All right, let's repeat the process for this blue graph over here. So we want to do the slope-intercept form of the line. So y equals mx plus b. Now this isn't going to be an equals problem because we have shading involved, so it's going to be an inequality. But we'll identify b and our slope. So b is where the graph crosses the y-axis, which is -3. And now we want to find our slope. So I need to find another place where it crosses perfectly in the corner of the box. This one right here comes to my mind at -1, -1. To find our slope, start with the point on the left. Figure out how to get back to the point on the right. Now the slope is always the change in your y on top and the change of the x on the bottom. So I go down 2, so -2 because it's down, over right 1. Right 1 means +1 on the bottom. So the slope of this line is -2. So to write our inequality, we have y and then some sign. We'll talk about that in just a second. We have -2x minus 3. Now to pick the sign, since we have a solid line here, that means our choices are either less than or equal to or greater than or equal to just because the line is solid. To pick which one of those it is, since we are shading on top of the line, we have to pick the y is greater than or equal to sign for this graph here. Okay, 2 more. Let's look at this green one. So this green one, the line is a horizontal line. Now remember, horizontal lines are written as y equals a number, and the number that we would set it equal to would be the y-intercept, which would be 4. So I know I'm going to have y, some kind of sign in 4, but it's not going to be equal to because we have a bunch of shading down here. Now, to pick my inequality sign, I'm looking and I have a solid line, which means that I have to either be less than or equal to or greater than or equal to because it's a solid line. Since I shade under it, y has to be less than, so y has to have the small part of the inequality sign on its side, and so we write y is less than or equal to 4. Last problem here is the vertical line here that has the inequality where we are shading to the right. So vertical lines are written as x equals a number. The number we use is where it touches the x-axis at, which is at 3. And so I have x and I have 3, and I just have to choose the correct inequality. We have a dashed line for our equation here. Dashed means we're going to either be less than or greater than for x. And I got to pick which one to use. Well, notice we shade to the right. So I shade to the right, I'm choosing bigger x values than where the line is, which means the big side of the inequality symbol has to be towards x.